That would actually be closer to a straw person. And let me explain the difference. A slippery slope is, I say, if you vote for this person, if you vote for Art Robinson, World War III will occur. Really? How does that work? Well, let me show you. And sometimes a slippery slope can be pushed into a reductio ad absurdum because the onus is on you. Well, think about it. I mean, there was one thing for a same-sex marriage. People said, well, if we allow same-sex marriage, people are going to start marrying animals, non-human animals.
I think they should marry him.
Well, I'm not really interested in your bizarre theory or feelings. Or you vote, don't you? It's probably just as well with your crazy ideas. I don't know where you're from, buddy, but in America, we don't marry other animals. I can't use this video. There's just no way. It's so offensive.
Can I actually do rhetorical?
Totally ripping on the guy. What's that?
Can I do rhetorical analysis in this class today?
No. No, you may not. So anyway, getting back to your question in all seriousness, is then I would turn that into a reductio. What you're talking about is called straw person, which is another one we should talk about. Give me something besides marrying animals. Give me like a fairly legitimate position on something.
Legalize crystal meth. Okay, fine.
Well, okay. I'm going to take that and translate it into a reasonable stance. The war on drugs has failed. We shouldn't be fighting the war on drugs. We shouldn't be incarcerating people. We should be treating them this time. That was funny. It's not as interesting, I know.
That sounds a lot more logical.
I know. I'm trying to salvage something out of this.
We're going for absurdity.
Like so.
No. We've moved on to straw
He
person.
wants a normal argument.
Oh.
Attack.
Oh my god.
Give me something. You know where I'm headed. I'm giving you nothing. Wow.
Okay, we'll go with something.
That was a lie.
How
That
about
was-
legalize marijuana?
There you go.
That's something that we can all agree is at least not totally ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
on the ballot. We're talking about it.
Well, how about that commercial that's been going like, you need to let independent voters like vote in the primaries. I always hear that one.
Oh, yeah.
That's good, too.
Yes,
Marijuana, that. Marrying animals. Those are all good. Well, let's go with that. So if I say to you, so you think that we should go ahead and legalize marijuana. That's your claim. What's your support?
We'll get more taxes, less people will go to jail, cops can spend their time doing other things.
Okay. Now, so what you're saying is that if we legalize marijuana, everybody's going to be okay,
Absolutely.
okay? And it'll be a better world,
Yes.
even though,
Correct.
and you acknowledge this, that it will cause looser morals. People won't be arrested for doing these horrible things.
That seems reasonable.
They'll be marrying animals left and right. This is what you're implying.
Yeah.
And they'll be doing crystal meth. It's a game.
And they'll be, because it's a gateway drug. That's what you're telling me.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm glad you picked up on my subtext.
Okay. Even though he's being very agreeable, what's wrong with my portrayal of his position?
Doesn't seem wrong to me.
Help me! I'm trying to teach. Help me.
You're misrepresenting the information.
Thank you. Wow. This wasn't supposed to take this long.
An advantage versus disadvantage, both arguments are valid. I mean, in my
Well-
ethics class, we do that.
But his argument had very little to do with mine.
I misrepresented it. So, for example, if I were to say that I think, trying to think of another. Oh, we should ban travel to keep Ebola under control before we and get ready for the so we should ban travel to international places and really start to concentrate on teaching our healthcare professionals how to handle a pandemic before we allow anything else to happen. Okay, and then you say, oh, so you're saying go into martial law, lockdown, and put anybody who's from Texas in jail, and see, and then I get weirder and weirder and weirder. I'm doing an exaggeration, but what you're doing is you're creating an easily defeatable position. You're creating a straw person of it, and that's what a straw person fallacy
Use
is.
that example. So it's a little clear.
But I just did.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of whole marijuana one, it was like.
He's
okay,
a
I
figment
see
of your
both. I can see
imagination.
both.
I'm getting reviews.
You just ignore him. He's just a figment.
He's not even a troll. He's a figment.
This is all on you then.
How self-loathing am I that I would actually imagine him? I feel like it's necessary to have you.
Got my skeletons in your closet, man.
I mean, if you're going to be criticizing me.
Okay.
No, I didn't mean because you're a bad person.
Or did
Okay.
He's okay now. Oh, I don't know if we have time to do the rest of them. If each one's going to take this long.
it shouldn't, don't worry. We'll cooperate.
No, you won't. I noticed you guys livened up quite a bit. I kind of like you better when you're all sitting there like mimes. I have to remember them now. Oh, okay, here we go. Ad populum. It's called a bandwagon appeal, and what it refers to is most people think this, therefore it must be a good idea. Whenever the majority, it's also called the lemming fallacy. Everybody seems to be going along with this. Everybody thought, so many people went to see Avatar and liked it, therefore it must be a good movie.
My favorite example is from Family Guy. Lois is running for mayor, and they're in the debate, and she's really, really struggling. Everybody loves Mayor West, and so Brian's like, you need to sound more patriotic. So to every question that she gets asked, she's like, 9/11, America. They're like, oh yes, we love you, Lois.
Yeah. And then eventually what happens is everybody's going to vote for her because everybody's like, oh yeah, she's great. To a large degree, what you're doing, if you go along with the crowd, is you're assuming because so many people agree with it, the populace, it's the most popular thing, therefore it must be the best idea. Whereas in some cases, you might be in the minority, but it actually, you might be right. You know. So that's the ad populum. False analogy. During spring term here, they have the Holocaust Memorial Week. And you'll have speakers coming from all over the country and sometimes from abroad to talk about the Holocaust. And there's a group that also sets up their tents in the Quad that are called the Genocide Awareness Project. Do you know these? It's a pro-life organization that shows very, very graphic pictures of abortions. And they have signs that say, warning, photos of genocide ahead. Now, what's interesting, by the way, about that, because we're talking about Kairos, they pick a very interesting Kairos to do that with. They pick Holocaust Memorial Week because they're basically saying, oh, we'll be able to get people, because they'll say, oh, pictures of genocide, and they'll assume it's going to be the Shoah, the slaughter of so many people during World War II, when in fact it's about abortion. It's anti-abortion. Now, many people who are involved in the Holocaust Memorial Week disagree with doing that because they say that's a false analogy. Abortion is not like genocide. Okay, they would call that a false analogy. Okay, in fact, some people, and by the way, regardless of how you feel about these issues, I'm using some pretty extreme examples. If someone says, "Well, abortion is murder," and if you're pro-life, you'd say, "Well, that's a false analogy. What is murder? Define what you mean by murder." And then we get into the conversation about how you define something. Are you using the term? And by the way, you see how these cross over? You could say, well, that's equivocation. It's a false analogy, and you're using the term, you're misapplying the term murder, if I'm pro-choice, right? Does that kind of make sense? Okay, good. So false analogy. Or I could also say, when we went to a war in Iraq, that was another Vietnam. And you always hear people say that. They'll point to a historical precedent, and they'll say, boy, we're in another Vietnam. Is that true? Are those wars similar enough to be analogous?
In some aspects, in others not so much.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue, you could say, well, both were invasions created on the premise of faulty information, the Gulf of Tonkin, WMDs. But they were also very different in a lot of ways. And you see how that one is very difficult because that will really define your position in terms of that. So false analogy, the onus is on you to say, well, no, they're not the same. That's a poor analogy. It's apples and oranges. And that's how that one works. Ad hominem. If I attack the person rather than the issue. So he pointed out that my marijuana one sucked, my example, and I agree. But if you said, I don't like that example, and if I were to say why, he'd say, because you're a jerk. He's attacking, you didn't do this. I'm completely making this up. You look concerned, that's why I'm...
Well, I don't know. You kind of called me mean earlier, so.
Did I call you mean?
No, you're like, oh, I made this figment of imagination, and I have him in here, and I was like, oh, okay.
Okay, I apologize.
No, I'm okay with that. I'm joking.
Now it's really kind of feeling heavy here, the gravitas. You kind of brought the whole mood down. You're like the worst figment I've ever come up with. What do you think of that?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny.
You want a piece of me? You are a piece of me. Oh, this got metaphysical quickly. I shouldn't even use you. That's the problem, because I know we're going to get into this thing, and then we'll get inside. So anyway, he'd be attacking me, or if I ask you, well, give me your position on a topic. Like, do you think we should have same-sex marriage in Oregon?
Yes, because it's already legal.
Is it? Okay. Well, says you.
Some words where we have.
Yeah, that's right. What about?
Okay, but how about you arguing that, we should not legalize same-sex marriage?
We should repeal that thing that happened. What do you think of that?
You must just be a jerk.
Yeah, you're ignorant.
Just don't like people.
Why you guys are attacking me all? I can't believe it.
We're doing an ad hominem.
Oh, I thought we were going back to... Yeah. So you know what ad hominem is, okay. And then finally, we have time for one more, and I'm going to let you guys go a little early because this has gotten crazy. What's that?
You can't handle it.
I can't handle this. I'm blanking. Actually, does anybody... What's that?
Tautology?
Tautology. Ooh, nice one. Actually, tautology is good, but I'm going to do argumentum in ad ignorantia. You guys know what a chupacabra is?
Yes.
Do you believe in them?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Definitely.
There's pitches.
It depends.
Okay, that was a bad example.
You'll find a good example with us.
I can't. We need to find something. Unicorns.
Yes.
Actually,
Yes, of course they
You guys are being really difficult.
Just think about
Yeah,
rhinos,
yeah.
right? Rhinos.
Everyone's pink.
Yeah, rhino. This is like the people that claim that the image of mermaids, or the whole thing of mermaids, came from manatees. Uh-huh. And sailors were so in love with these beautiful women.
Narwhals are technically unicorns too.
Manatees?
Unicorns of the sea.
Good. You'll find something eventually. Keep going.
Oh, good. The onus is on me to find a reasonable example that you won't attack.
Bigfoot? I don't know.
Bigfoot.
No one believes in penguins.
Bigfoot is
No one believes in penguins?
definitely a thing.
I've never seen a penguin, actually.
I have pictures of my
We've never been.
You have pictures? Oh, sure, you have pictures. You have pictures of Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster.
We do.
My mom actually has a picture of the Loch Ness Monster,
Yeah, but it's a picture.
but she's
You could go to the zoo and look at penguins.
vegetables. I don't believe in vegetables.
All right. It's the last one. Let's try to get through it. Oh, my.
Okay.
Wait, let's
Let's
go.
say we don't believe in unicorns, even though they do exist, but we don't believe in unicorns. Continue about
We will all suspend our disbelief.
Suspend your disbelief of unicorns just for this example.
Okay. Suspending our belief. We're suspending our belief.
What's that?
We're suspending our belief.
Okay, good. So, Can you prove that there are unicorns?
Careful, there's not.
You can't prove that there's not unicorns. That's argumentum ignorantia, ad ignorantia. The onus is on the person who says something is true to prove that it is true, not on the person. The classic example is Bertrand Russell's teapot. And he says, he was a fairly famous mathematician and philosopher and atheist, and he said he didn't believe in God, and someone said, we'll prove that there's no God. And he says, well, I don't have to prove there isn't a God. You need to, the onus is on you to prove that there is a God. And then his example was, there is a teapot orbiting the sun. It's very small, and you can't see it, but it's there. And then someone said, well, that's ridiculous. He said, prove that it's not there. Does that make sense? You can't argue from a place of ignorance and say, well, you can't prove it's not true, therefore it must be true. That's not the scientific way. If it were the scientific method, then it would be problematic.